Am I on? Am I on there? Am I on? Am I on?
Finance meeting.
Yeah.
I have no idea. It's not on email.
Right. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the 7th of July Strategy and Policy Committee meeting. Sorry for all our guests and committee, we are running behind time, so I'm going to schedule an afternoon tea break at 3:15. And right, so we've got apologies first. Councillor Forsyth, you're obviously not an apology, or are you leave? No, I had that on my notes. Councillor Pascoe is an apology. And are there any other apologies or anyone leaving earlier? Early?
So I'd move.
No?
I just noticed that Andrew's not here at the moment.
Yes, he is.
Oh, there. Sorry, my apologies.
Okay, thank you. So that's
Such an
apologies
insignificant little thing.
have been moved by the Mayor and seconded by Councillor Forsyth. All those in favour?
Aye.
Are there any against? That's carried. Right, confirmation of the agenda. Now, councillors, you all have had circulated a late item, which is the Local Government New Zealand report. There's 4 remits there to go to the LGNZ AGM, which is on the 19th. And understanding orders 3.5.6, the items not on the agenda need to have a resolution to be accepted. I just wanted to explain why this particular item can't be delayed, and it was only received yesterday by the CE, and the AGM is on the 19th, so that's the end of next week. And if we want to have these remits considered onto the AGM.
That's our delegation that goes to that.
Yes,
right. Got
yes, yeah. So I'll move that be accepted onto the agenda.
Sure.
If there's a seconder. The Deputy Mayor, is there any questions or discussions on that? No? All those in favour?
Right.
Are there any against? That's carried. Thank you. Right, are there any we'll consider that at the end of the agenda. Are there any declarations of interest? No, and I've been advised there is no members of public forum today. Right, we'll go to the Chairperson's report. That's just a verbal report on page 5. I just wanted, over the last couple of months, we've been checking in with the advisory panels that we have on council, and those are the older persons, the youth, the arts and the heritage, just to check mid-term to see how they're going, because those advisory panels report up to this committee. And I've met with the elected members on there, so thank you very much to the feedback from Councillors Gallagher, Young, Forsyth and the Deputy Mayor who sit on those panels, and also the chairs of those panels, just to make sure that they're achieving their work programs and they're finding the process of how they deal with or information flow up and down to our committee is going. From the feedback from some of the elected members and the chairs and the members of the panels, we've I guess just tightened up a little bit of process, and thank you very much to Democracy for helping in terms of that. One of the things which was pretty easy really is the standardised minutes, and Democracy are going to now be doing that for those advisory groups. And also I'll be catching up with the chairs of those advisory groups twice a year, just over a cup of tea, and to make sure that things are going well. And then they also of course do their annual report, and you'll start seeing those over the next 2 Strategy and Policy Committee meetings. So that was really all I wanted to say on that. So thank you for those councillors that gave me that feedback.
I think you've answered. The only thing I'd have to say, you have an annual report.
Comes to the committee, yeah.
And that's good, and that gives the exposure to the conveners or the chairs or the members of those panels.
Yeah.
Is there any other thought process beyond just the annual report? Because that's sort of once a year, I know, and I'm trying to think aloud a little bit in terms of, we have, for example, with our subcommittees come at least, mandatorily once every 6 months.
Yes.
And I'm wondering if the panels, in terms of the good work they do now, I acknowledge, for example, the older persons panel is going to report into the community forum around older persons policy, but it's just probably a bit of just leave it at this point, a bit of reflection on whether that's adequate.
So-
And I'm thinking
yeah,
for those groups
Yeah.
to be, exposure to the membership at large.
Yeah, so thank you, Councillor Gallagher, because that's one of the things that you raised with me when
Yeah.
we caught up, and
Yeah.
it's a fair point. As well as myself catching up with the chairs on a couple of times a year, that's enables them to also raise issues. Plus, of course, they can raise issues with the likes of yourself and the deputy mayor, etc., that sit on those advisory panels. And also, I'll just be kept in an email loop when they have their set their agendas as well, and that helps give oversight. So it's just tidying up a few loose ends.
And I think probably, if I may say, just to stress to all of our advisory panels that at any time, if there's a specific item
Yeah.
they want to bring to the attention of the council as a whole, then they have a right to go through the relevant parent
Yeah.
committee.
One of the other things too, and I didn't list all of the little bits and pieces, but was that when this committee signs off our work program at the beginning of the year, then I will take that to those advisory groups as well with staff and just let them have oversight and make sure that, when we look at our work program, if something on the elected members around the table specifically want a certain advisory panel to look at, then that will be captured very early on that way. Thank you, Councillor Forsyth.
So I just like, it might be a good opportunity to make a comment, and thank you for the input that you've had with the Youth Advisory Panel and Chair and myself. But I just would also like to remind Councillor Laws that these advisory panels are open, and that we would love to see any of you attend any of our meetings, just in support and also to understand what's going on and from my point of view in the Youth Advisory Panel. So thank you to Councillor O'Leary and Her Worship the Mayor who have attended in the past, but it would be really lovely to see at least a couple of Councillor Laws come along to our meetings. It'd be
Great.
fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. All right, so I will move that my verbal chair's report be received. Can I have a seconder for that?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Councillor Gallagher. Any debate? All those in favour? Any against? That's carried. Right, we'll move on to page number 6, the strategy and policy open minutes for the 26th of May. Page 7. Page 6. Right, there are any matters for correctness arising from the minutes? I can confirm that they are true and correct, so I'm happy to move those. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Wilson, thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
There's very, very detailed, Councillor McPherson left at 4:24, Councillor McPherson came back at 4:27.
So what page are you on,
Oh, so
Councillor?
page 13, for example.
Yeah.
Is that matter, or is it just who was there during the voting?
Democracy can answer that one. I think that's standard practice.
Or is it just standard practice? I mean, it just must be hard.
It's just, I think it looks different because there's a bit of a list, but that was
Yeah.
a fairly active meeting. We were in
I remember.
and out, yeah. So I think that would be
Okay.
right, Democracy Manager.
Yes, standing orders do require democracy to record when members leave the meeting. We normally put emphasis on the decision-making parts of the meeting. I think that's where the public has the most interest in terms of members being in attendance for the voting.
So
Councillor McPherson.
isn't that then a bit of a value judgment as to when the decision part of the process is going, given that there are some councillors that have left meetings at other stages recently? Would they be recorded? It's better to be consistent all the way through than try and second guess when the decision is going to be finalised, isn't it?
Through you, Madam Chair, I do agree consistency is important, Councillor, and I'll just have a quick look at that to make sure we are following a consistent formatting for the minutes.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So those have been moved and seconded. So I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Any against? That's carried. Right, we're on to item number 7, the policy review program update on page 17. This is here, just as you know, committee, we started at the beginning of the triennial actually, looking at a policy review program, and it was certainly my endeavour to have that review program completed well before the end of this term, so that possibly the incoming council would then end up with a book of policies that they could discuss and spend possibly in their first 100 days of being in governance, rather than spending 3 years doing it. So this is basically a snapshot and a stock take of where we are at the moment. So Tegan, this is your report. You can take the report as read and just answer any questions if we have any. We're cutting through the red tape. It's good.
I'm happy to move the recommendation, Chair, on page 18.
Thank you, Your Worship.
I'll second.
Thank you, Councillor Forsyth. Are there any questions? No. If not, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour?
Right.
Any against? That's carried. Thank you. Thanks, Tegan. Hamilton Cemeteries Management Plan Adoption Report, item 8, page 26. It's going fast for me. Hi, Sally. Hi, Renee. Okay. Right, you can take the report as read as well. If you just want to just tell us why we're here.
Thank you through the Chair. Today we're just seeking your endorsement to adopt the Hamilton Cemeteries Management Plan. This has gone through a hearings process. We have updated the plan itself based on the submissions that we've received. So we're here to answer any questions that you have today.
Great, thank you. Right, any questions from the committee? Councillor Mallett.
Thank you. Just a comment stroke question on the sort of the format of the way the thing's done. I've noticed since I've been here this time that there's lots and lots of bubbles and things appearing in our reports. And I genuinely find those difficult to sort of follow. I mean, I'm just a bullet point sort of guy, and heading, and then summary, then the bullet points underneath. We start talking about first tier and second tier, and those things aren't sort of well articulated to me, and I just find it I would find it quite difficult to say, this report is going to do this, or, the actions stemming from this report are this, we will be measured on that against these criteria in 6 months' time, in 12 months' time, in 2 years' time. So I guess to me, I find this a report that I would find it hard to manage an organisation that was running under reports like this.
So you're talking about the actual plan, aren't you?
The actual plan.
Thank you. I wonder if, Sally, who is using this plan? Who is this document for? Who's the audience?
So the audience itself is, it is a public document, so it is for the community to read what we will be doing at the cemetery over the next 10 years within resources available, but it is a document that the cemetery managers will use to implement, so it is both an internal and external document.
Okay, thank you.
So in a year's time, or a period of time, we will be looking at the plan, because the plan is showing in the future what we want to achieve. What will we have tried to achieve? I mean, I think it says something about respecting people's wants, needs and whatnot.
Yes, so in terms of the key actions, obviously the cemetery will work through implementing the key actions which are outlined throughout the plan. I think if I can correct, if you're right, Councillor Mallett, is around, I suppose, a time frames based on the actions on when we're going to do that, and that itself is not clearly articulated in the plan. So maybe an action table at the end is something that we could add into with time frames, so that that's a lot clearer for the community to understand.
And maybe some budgets, or some, what it's going to cost and those sort of things. I guess my goal is, as a member of the government's group here, I would find it really hard to go back, and you'll come back for this, I guess, in 6 months or sometime, and say, this is how we're going, and I wouldn't know how to measure you.
Yeah, I appreciate that feedback, yes.
Councillor Gallagher, questions?
No, I'll probably reserve some comment. I mean,
Okay, sure. I'll put you down first for that. Councillor McPherson.
Yes, Sally, could you explain just a little bit more about 22, 23, 24? I mean, I've read stuff in the media, which is more than is in here, about the reasoning there, and I'd like to sort of hear that from you guys, if I could, please, about, why it's not possible to have, it looked to me like the proposal is a facility for families and friends with a bit more comfort than standing out in the car park in the weather.
Yeah, so through the development of our plan, a submitter challenged the lawfulness of such facilities at Hamilton Park Cemetery, so that was the reception lounge. Legal advice has been sought from Tompkins Wake, and as a result we have parked this development, which also aligns with no funding being allocated within the 10-year plan. So the legal advice that has been provided identifies that under the Burial and Cremation Act, the proposed development is not authorised, and therefore we wouldn't be able to go ahead with that.
I can understand all of that. In fact, it says all of that, Sally, but that's not what I'm asking. I'm asking for an explanation. What's behind that? What was the objection? What was our intent in the proposed plan? What was the objection?
Councillor, sorry, can you pull your mic down? I'm having trouble hearing.
What was behind that? That you're just talking about the legalities. I understand that.
So in terms of the plan itself, the Burial and Cremation Act is currently under review, and so as staff we had drafted parts of the plan looking forward in terms of the future of that review. What we've identified is that we can only make decisions based on current legislation, so we've gone to future thinking when we needed to look at based on this current legislation. So within the plan we had identified an area to develop a reception and a larger lounge. Because that's not identified as possible within the current Act, we couldn't go forward with that, and that's what the question was raised during the submissions process.
See, it's still not really making it clear to me. All of that, I can read that myself. Was it a cultural objection? Was it just someone picking up a legal technicality?
It was not cultural, it was just a legal technicality that was raised.
Councillor, I wonder if it would be helpful if we could go to the chair of the hearings panel. Councillor Tooman, can you tell us
Yes, if I
what the
remember
submitter
correctly,
talked about?
Madam Chair, there was an objection from the former manager, I think, of cemeteries, who said that we're unable to proceed with the reception lounge and what was the other area you mentioned, Gordon?
Just picking up on, if you don't mind, Chair, picking up on Councillor McPherson's point. There was a point made to the hearings about, from a Maori perspective, having food in a place of death. And so there was some consideration around that. There was a submitter who was preparing to open a cafe and reception conference type area relatively close by, so that particular submitter had concerns that the city would be competing with her business. But I would agree with the points you've raised that it is a difficult matter to address when there are some large funerals held there, and we cannot house the people out of the weather. So until that act is changed, I think that we're not in a position to revisit that for a period.
Okay, that's helpful, the Deputy Mayor, but what's the part of, in a nutshell, the part of the Act that doesn't allow us to have a bigger reception area or a flasher reception area? I could understand maybe the bit about food preparation, and certainly from a cultural perspective, but I mean, I can't understand the other bit. I'm not, you may not.
Madam Chair, maybe I could get Sally to help. If you could just outline in the legal advice the subsection of the Act which Tompkins Wake have based their legal advice on, and then Section 8 of the Act as well. So if you could take Councillor McPherson through that, Sally, I think that will clarify matters.
If I can. It's subsection 21, 1 of the Burial and Cremation Act 64 states, a local authority shall not make use of land comprised in a cemetery for any purpose except such as is authorised by this Act. And then it goes down that within subsection 21.6 of the Act, it doesn't stipulate a reception lounge as being authorised or available to be used. So there's sections within the Act that identify what we cannot do, and that's included in that.
Well, hang on, you just said there's sections of the Act that identify what we cannot do, and actually that's not the case. It identifies things we can do, but it's silent, isn't it, about the reception lounge? Or, I mean, it just seems to me that there's an absurd technicality going here. We've got a great big chapel, I don't know which I presume you're allowed, but that's also is used for receptions. We just don't call it a reception lounge.
Yeah,
I think we've succumbed to some legal technicality rather than looking at the common sense which was inherent in the original proposal.
So if I can, in terms of our existing lounge predates the Act, so it was built prior to the Act itself. And in terms of obviously the legal advice, there is within the legal advice identifies what is prohibited, but it does not clearly state within the Act what is not allowed. But in saying that a reception lounge is not described within the Act as being able to be built on cemetery land.
But it's all, okay.
So if we'd called it something else, we probably wouldn't have had the same objection. That seems to be what it boils down to. You know,
Yeah,
extension, chapel extension.
And just following on from Councillor McPherson, I completely agree with him. I had a very brief look at the Act last night, and I couldn't see anything that said you can have a playground, and yet we're proposing a playground. So isn't that the same?
If I can, through the chair, alternatively, if council wishes to proceed with the proposed development, then we could look at changing the status of the land. Staff didn't proceed with that option on the basis that there's no funding for the proposed facility in the long-term plan, so it wouldn't be looking to go ahead within the next 10 years anyway.
Well, that's not strictly correct. 3 years, yes, because in another 3 years' time we do the new 10-year plan. I think in these sorts of circumstances, I'm not arguing for more money to be put in there. I'm arguing for allowing for the possibility of something that we had previously thought was a good idea would service the needs of the community. We should at least allow for that possibility to happen should finance become available in a future edition of the 10-year plan, for instance. That's, you know, it doesn't involve a change to the 10-year plan.
Okay.
It involves a policy agreement, really.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions? Your worship?
So I just can't open the Act, and otherwise I was going to read the section. Just so that I can be clear here, we have an old Act, and there's a section in that Act that says what you can do. Have I got that right?
Yes.
And in that list, it doesn't say that you can have a reception lounge.
Yes, that's
And
right.
and that Act's like 1960s or something, is it?
Yes, it is, 64.
64. Good year. Okay. So, no, sadly, before that, unfortunately. Oh, no, it just feels like a good year. So I'm with Councillor McPherson. I'm just trying to struggle to understand here what, you know, if it's silent, is there any cases or something that said, well, you can't do it? No?
No?
Okay.
Madam Chair, could I jump in?
Yep.
I've read the
Please
legal advice.
Yeah, but
It's quite a cautious piece of legal advice in my view. I think, as Renee said, if council did want to provide the opportunity, notwithstanding the funding issues for this option going forward, council could look at changing the status of the land if it didn't want to be in risk of breaching this current Act. My view would be that we should move ahead with approving the management plan. There is a review of this this piece of legislation which has been chugging through a whole bunch of consultation for the last 2 years. And if the legislation changes, then as we report back around the legislation change and what that may or may not allow, if it doesn't change, then we come back and say, what is the option for council if it wants to do this, is to amend the management plan and change the status of a piece of land under the Reserves Act to allow that to happen.
I'm sensing from the committee that wouldn't be sufficient, that we don't need to wait for that.
Can I am still, sorry, I have other questions, Chair.
Sure.
But what I was going to say is, but you can also include in the management plan that we can include that in anticipation of change, because it's on the actioning of it, right? It's on the actioning of that there could be an issue. It's not on the inclusion in the management plan, right? Yeah, so I mean,
Sorry,
I
Wish,
just think
could you
it's
just explain what you mean there?
Well, what I'm saying is you can include it in the document, but it only becomes an issue when you start to actually do it.
Or
Right.
a potential issue.
Yes, potential issue. So I think that's a whole pile of red tape and jumping over hoops, and I understand caution and risk aversion, but really, and I guess it's for later. I do have some other questions, however, if I may.
Yeah.
I too struggled a little. I actually thought the presentation was really attractive, and I thought the maps and that were really good, but I did actually really struggle with understanding what actually are we going to do, and is it short-term, medium-term, long-term, to realise a vision which I think is already achieved, but it's good to have it, I suppose. Provide burial and cremation services in a respectful way, well, we do, in beautiful park-like settings, which we do, where the community can remember loved ones, yep, and appreciate our city's heritage. It all sounds exactly what we do now. So I read this plan as we're wanting to keep going in the direction we're going. So I really struggled with understanding what actually are we going to do in entirety. I'd like to see an action list in this, and I'd like to see them short, medium, long term, because some of these actions actually are like a tweak. They're like put up a sign. They're like make the website clearer. I mean, I would assume those are business as usual and could be done, straight away kind of stuff. So I think that would be helpful, really. So that would be my feedback on the presentation. And I would like to see, I don't see there's any reason why we can't include the aspiration of a place where people can gather after a funeral. So those are my questions, which was a little bit longer than the question.
Thank you, Your Worship. Any Councillor McPherson?
Well, I would like to signal an amendment
Oh, it's just, yep.
to 8B.
Could I ask a question?
Oh, question, sorry, I often don't see you, my peripheral vision.
Is Hamilton Park Cemetery on Morrinsville Road in the city boundary? What does it cost? Is everything there user pays?
Yes, it is. It is 100% cost recovery at the moment, yes.
So if you hire the chapel, you pay for your share of the use of the chapel?
Yes.
What does a plot cost?
It is $3,605 for a plot.
Do we make any money out of that?
So in terms of...
Is there a profit that's spun
No.
out of that?
No. So it's 100% cost recoverable to cover expenses.
So in Waipa, at the Hautapu Cemetery, you can buy a double plot for $1,300, about a third of the price. And if you're from out of town, if you haven't got a passport, you have to pay a extra fee of about $300, so it comes to $1,643. It's only 8 minutes drive away. Why the big difference?
I'll just ask for the cemetery manager to answer the difference in terms of the costs between the two cemeteries. They are set up quite differently in terms of maintenance provider, so I'll just ask her to comment on that.
So the Waikato Regional Cemeteries that
Stand up.
in the Waikato region receive ratepayer subsidies. Most of them sit around 60-70% is funded by rates for their operation, and the rest, the 30-40%, is from their fees and charges. So we are 100% cost recoverable. We do not receive ratepayer subsidy for our operational costs. We are in keeping with our benchmarking partners in Auckland, who are exactly the same. They are 100% cost recoverable.
So because of that, I understand we're losing opportunities to add our cemetery. People are going over the border to be buried.
I'm not sure of that. I have no understanding of that.
Thank you.
Is that it, Andrew? Yeah. Okay, so Councillor McPherson, you've got a motion to share with us?
Yeah, just before that, just on that last point, if I may, Madam Chair, I can recall about 4 or 5 years ago when we last had our review, we did propose a differential between ratepayers and non-ratepayers, and we received a, let's say, vociferous objection from a undertaker in Thames that he would take all of his business to Auckland
That's right.
instead of coming here, and he happened to have been, when he, in the recent past anyway, the Deputy Mayor of Thames. He thought he had quite a lot of influence, and he actually did on this occasion. So that was a little bit of history. We tried to do the same thing. But, sorry, my amendment.
Motion, because we haven't got one on the
Oh,
table.
okay, well, I'll move it. And I'm trying to encapsulate the points that the Mayor has made as well. A, as is. B, that the proposed Hamilton Gardens Cemeteries Management Plan, then bracket, sorry, a comma, including the proposed development, in inverted commas, and that's actually the title of thing in page 22,
Yeah.
be adopted as operative. I think that's
Councillor, did you
simple
want
as
to
make it.
include anything, some of the concerns around the formatting, the Mayor raised action list?
I'm happy to if the wording can be found.
Are there any, is there any problem with us coming back with those changes to the next S&P meeting? Any timeline thing? So look, I quickly drafted up something if you want to, it's not very good, I'm sure Democracy or you can do a better job. That staff reformat the plan to an easy to read format that includes an action list with a timeline and report back to the next S&P. Does that work for you?
Well,
don't-
I would say including the, in inverted commas, proposed development.
Oh, yeah, that's to attach on to.
Oh, it's as a C, is it?
As a C.
Yep, sure.
So, Democracy, that would be that staff reformat the plan to an easy-to-read format that includes an action list with timeline and report back to the next Strategy and Policy Committee meeting, which, can you please put the date in there? I think.
There's been a suggestion that we say
11th of
the
August.
action list, including costings.
I think that that's quite difficult with respect.
Yeah, normally with it.
Because a major project will come up for debate and allocation and a priority setting for budgeting, whereas small things can happen in business as usual.
It could be included in the report, certainly any budget lines.
Yeah,
That
I
would-
guess I'm only
yeah.
thinking of capital
Rather-
items, not
Yeah.
operational or minor things that are included within the budget.
Well, I mean, they could cut the action list on the basis of short-term business as usual actions
Yeah.
and longer-term capital
Yeah.
investment.
Yes,
Yeah, something like that.
if it's cut up like that, perfect.
Yeah, okay, so that's the 11th of August. Are we using the board? Can we have that up just so we can see the resolution? Thanks. So that's been moved by Councillor McPherson, seconder.
I'll second.
Your worship. I'll just wait for that to go up on the board. Now, Councillor Gallagher, you signalled you wanted to speak, but I'll go to the mover first and then come to you.
I'm fine, I think I've made the
Okay.
point.
All right, so Councillor Gallagher, would you like to debate that?
Well, bear with me, but hey, this is my opportunity. First of all, I compliment the team and the staff team for this piece of work, and also the hearings panel for, Leo and the team through going through this, and I thank you for that. I just, first of all, want to just re-emphasise the significance of the Hamilton East Cemetery and the Hamilton West Cemetery in terms of the historic significance. and even acknowledge that one of our great mayors in the last few years was actually buried at Hamilton East, Sir Ross Jansen. I also acknowledge, if I can, the Hamilton East Cemetery for the role it and the Newstead Cemetery plays in terms of our war graves and those who came back or died soon after. And it's, to visit Hamilton East, to put it mild, is extremely poignant to see the number of our returned soldiers who died of obviously war-related conditions in the early 1920s. However, I noticed Hamilton Park Cemetery was opened in 1957. And please, staff, don't take this personally. In the days before highly paid corporate professionals, in the days when we used to have a town clerk and a city engineer, and in the days of Harold Caro as the mayor, Rod Braithwaite as the mayor, Dennis Rogers, Jimmy Baird as deputy mayor, etc. And what is the critical thing in my view is that they future-proofed the Newstead site. Didn't need any expensive reports and expensive time and motion studies and all of that would cost us an arm and a leg. Pretty simple, really. They said, what is the needs? Let's do some prediction. And of course you have from the State Highway through to Vale Road. And I think that's, I just want to always again, and I think we should never forget an early council in the 1950s and late 40s who had vision and foresight. Didn't need a CCO to do that. Didn't need a CCO, just got on and did it. So I'm going to just thank them again from the bottom of my heart for the vision. And the only caution I have is if some of us hopefully will be around in 2045 when it comes to the end of a particular footprint of 2050. I'm sure the Deputy Mayor will be there and I'll be there hopefully. It's just making sure that as it gets larger, because you talk about 4 hectares going to 14 hectares, that somehow, particularly with the entrance point off Vale Road, is that we can maintain that sense of specialness and that the actual site doesn't become just too huge and overwhelming. And I think so far that's actually been achieved quite well. So all of that design and the different ways of doing that, I hope, obviously. So again, I just want to absolutely thank the vision of a previous council and also acknowledge absolutely the excellent staff we have and a very good hearings committee that I think have brought us to a very satisfactory point.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor McPherson, just on B, you happy we need to take out be adopted as operative, obviously, at the end of that, because we're not adopting it yet.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Just the comma and be adopted as operative. Leave the development in there, yeah. So finishing at including...
Report it back to the next meeting of this committee.
That's in C.
Well, you have to say what's happening to it.
That
it doesn't make sense without saying what's happening.
Do you have... Okay, so be reported...
Whatever the same as, yeah.
No, you don't have to, because you've said it in
will
the
I
next
just
bit.
change including to include?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
That would do it. Good spot of you, Jude.
Include... Yeah.
Democracy's just having the bloody...
Without the comma.
Yeah. Right, Councillor Mallett.
Thank you. Question and clarification. The resolution B has something called include proposed development. And I appreciate that that's point 22 on page 27, but that seems to me to be really nebulous. Is there some document you can actually refer to? Is there some, I assume it's to do with the reception lounge and all that sort of carry on.
It's called in the document the proposed, what Councillor McPherson said, it's called the proposed development.
Okay, in a couple of years' time or something like that,
Well, they'd have to look at the report.
there needs to be some reference, proper, a plan or some document that is, what is that? Is there something called the...
The reception area, Councillor, is called the proposed development, and at the very top, if someone was to look back at these minutes, that the report be received, you've got to look at the whole report to get the context.
Yeah, and the report there, and the report says there was a proposal. So presumably there's a document which is the proposal, which is the proposed development. Where is that document?
It is, if I could say as mover, it is actually confusing along the lines of what Councillor Mallett says, because where the proposed Hamilton Cemeteries management plan was what was, on my understanding, was what was put out to the community, and that included the proposed development. But now what's proposed to us, recommended to us, doesn't include it.
So, Your Worship,
So it
you
should
have,
be that-
Your Worship has a
B
comment.
should say that they,
Recommend.
are we approving it and then they're bringing back the action list, or are we not approving it and waiting for the action list to come back? That's a question I have for the chair.
Well, that's a question for the mover.
Well, you added the
And
last bit. I
when-
want to include I want to approve it with the proposed
Oh, okay,
development.
it's your motion.
Okay, so
Yep.
it should be to say that the Hamilton Cemeteries Management Plan 2015, including a proposal to construct a building at Hamilton Park Cemetery to house a lounge and administrative reception centre, because it's got to include what that is,
Yep. Yep, fine.
is approved,
Yep, okay.
And that.
that we know what that is. And then the only thing that's coming back, as I understand it, the 11th of August, is to take all the actions in the plan and to put them into a document that I would imagine is going to be one of those, fold-out things at the back. That tells us what's going to happen and when.
Yep.
And some of those, of course, will be subject to prioritisation in the budgeting process, right? So I've got that right?
Yes.
And is that easy to do?
Yes.
Right.
So I'm still not 100% sure that including a proposal to
Yeah,
construct.
so I think Democracy is still typing what.
It should say including the proposal to construct,
Yep.
so forth.
A building at
as
Hamilton
in
Park
the
Cemetery to house a
proposed
lounge
plan.
and administrative reception centre. It's all in paragraph 22.
It's not a proposal, it's the proposal.
Yeah.
Give them time to type. Change A to B.
And I'm taking it, staff, that that's clear enough for you to include that as an action in the relevant part of the document. Yeah?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And that, of course, would be subject to prioritisation in the budget.
Yes.
Right.
So can I it still needs to be clearer. The proposal to construct a building to house a lounge and administration reception area as proposed in the plan that went out for consultation. Is that what we're saying? So please, can we please put that up there?
Yeah.
Because that,
Wait that in, it's fine.
otherwise, that standing
Okay.
alone is
No, I
anything.
think,
You could
yeah,
drive a
we're-
bloody truck through that.
We're all agreeing? Just write the word.
Is that clear?
Big truck.
Is that clear?
As,
Construct a
after
building
reception area, comma, as proposed in the, whatever you call.
Whatever that consultation
at-
document
Proposed in
was.
the Hamilton Cemeteries Management Plan.
The draft
The
plan.
first two sentences say that.
Well, it's
Proposed
spelled,
management plan including the proposal. The plan including the proposal.
This is like designing a horse by committee.
well, it does show that options should be put to committees, not just staff recommendations when there are issues. And then we're prepared.
Madam Chair, you need to
Is
take
that-
out the first proposed word if you're actually going
Yes.
to approve the plan,
Yep.
Okay.
because
Correct?
it's not a proposal anymore, it
That's right.
becomes the plan.
That's right.
That spells
I have a
out
question, Madam Chair, when you're ready.
Is that, Councillor McPherson, is that
It spells it out, even if it does double up.
seconder? Are you happy with that?
Because my understanding is at the moment, the proposal from staff doesn't include that because you've got legal advice that we're breaking the law doing it.
Staff have mixed up the words proposal and recommendation. They've recommended a plan to us. The proposed plan was the original one that went out for consultation.
And we heard from the General Manager that he'd be comfortable with this approach. Yep, he's
Chair, you
nodding.
should delete as proposed in the draft plan and just make it area is approved because you've got the proposal on the second line.
No,
Okay, hang on. We're going to stop till 3 o'clock to get this sorted out. We're going to come back at 3:05 so you can sort this out because there's too many people talking.